Hello, hello. Today we're going to be looking at the astrology charts of David Bowie and a lot of his music. We'll, we'll see how much of it feels appropriate to do in this video. We'll start with his reading now, or his chart, his birth chart. So I'm going to be doing the sidereal chart. This is the most common one used in Vedic or Indian astrology. And I'm going to be focused on the Indian signs of the zodiac, which there's 27 of them. They're called nakshatras. And they're kind of like a zoomed in view of the regular zodiac that you may or may not be more familiar with. Most people would be more familiar with, Aries, etc., Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. So the way that I came to wanting to do this video today is because I was doing some research and I was seeing who had their ascendant right at this degree of Capricorn. It's at about 10 or 11 degrees. We can get the exact degree. Because this is in a very small window that would be considered the most. I was actually looking for anyone that was between 5 to 10 degrees Capricorn, because that's pretty much the area of the chart that covers this one nakshatra called Abhijit, which is it's the tiniest nakshatra. It's kind of hidden. All the other nakshatras are of equal length. They're all, I believe, 13 degrees and 20 minutes. And Abhijit overlaps the very end of Uttara Ashada and Shravana in Capricorn. And it covers about 4 degrees. So, it goes up to almost 11 degrees. I mean, David Bowie's right at the cusp. But since we have this is a AA verified birth time of 9 a.m. But, I don't know, 99 times out of 100, if a birth time is right on the hour, no matter how verified it is, it's probably off by at least 5 minutes, maybe less, maybe more. But in David Bowie's case, that wouldn't really change this location too much, or in anyone's case. 5 minutes is not going to change that many degrees. I think it takes 10, 20 minutes to change a degree, something like that. So in any case, it's a good place to start for this reading, because I want to cover this one nakshatra called Abhijit, which I also covered in my reading of Teal Swan's chart, which I haven't uploaded yet. But Teal Swan has, I believe, her moon or sun. I think her moon is in Abhijit, which again is at the very end of Uttara Ashada, the very beginning of Shravana, in the middle of Capricorn. So first we could start off just by talking about Capricorn. It's known to be, about hard work, determination, focus. It's ruled by Saturn. So it's very focused, grounded, cold. It's the cardinal earth sign. And so the nakshatras we have in the sign are Uttara Ashada, which is about the achievement of victory and power, after having gone through the, trying to get that power over in some way, which is in Purva Ashada before it. And then we have Shravana and Dhanishta, which are they're actually about music, funny enough, among other things. But Shravana is about listening to the divine or the intuition for some guidance to make it up the mountain, to make it to the final result of Capricorn. At the center of Capricorn, you have Shravana, which I believe his ascendant is falling inside of. Let's double check that. It falls in about 17 minutes into Shravana. And so I'm trying to record a horizontal view this time, and so forgive me if there's any issues. But so ascendant is what we look at first in any birth chart, whether it's a person or a song or album or whatever. And the ascendant is the most obvious thing about a person or a thing. It's the thing that they have as their greatest strength in terms of what they're going to use most of the time in life. And so having an ascendant at the beginning of Shravana, and by beginning, I mean the first degree of Shravana, which if it was 1 degree later, it would no longer be in this hidden nakshatra of Abhijit, which you do not see here. It's not covered visually in most charts because it kind of messes up the symmetry, and it overlaps Uttarashada and Shravana, like I said. But it covers the last pada or part of Uttarashada and the first degree of Shravana, basically, from about 7 to 11 degrees of Capricorn, sidereally. Or, well, yeah, pretty much sidereally, which is the Indian way of measuring all. Well, yeah, I won't get into the tropical sidereal zodiac right now, but that's a whole other topic. But anyway, but having the ascendant in Shravana and the final degree, it's just occurring to me that Abhijit could, most nakshatras are divided into 4 parts, which are called padas, and they cover 13, well, they cover about 3 degrees and 20 minutes each. And that's because 13 degrees and 20 minutes times 4 adds up to, I'm sorry, 3 degrees and 20 minutes adds up to 13 degrees and 20 minutes. I hope I said that right. So the point is, you see Shravana that has about 13 degrees and some change that it's covering. You can see from the 10-degree mark upward. And so you could divide that into 4, and that's the 4 padas. The final, and so there's this journey, there's this sort of hero's journey within everything in astrology. There's like a hero's journey from beginning to end, from Aries to Pisces, or from the 1st house to the 12th house. There's a hero's journey within a sign of going from Capricorn, we're going from Uttarashada to Shravana to Dhanishta. Then you have a hero's journey within each of those even that lasts about 3 degrees, except with Abhijit, it lasts 4 degrees. Each step is only 1 degree, roughly. So the point is that David Bowie has this most extreme, auspicious, masterful degree for his ascendant in the entire chart of the final degree of Abhijit in the 1st degree of Shravana, which is interesting because Shravana can be directly related to channeling and mysticism and music and divine inspiration and guidance. And so having his ascendant, it means there's something magical. Like I didn't pull up this chart, but he played the Goblin King in the movie Labyrinth, directed by Jim Henson with the Muppeteers, which is a great movie. And I forget the name of the actress in it, but she was great in it too. And so, yeah, this ascendant, it's just very auspicious. It means that, like, from the time David Bowie's born until the time he dies, he's just known and recognized as some kind of genius. And he always was throughout his life. When he was younger, he was struggling to be as famous as he became, and he was, he hadn't found his voice yet, so to speak, but he was always very prominent in the group of people he was running with, whether it was mimes or whether it was that type of folk he did his first album with the funny haircut. And he was always he was always standing out as special and great. And then we have directly across from his ascendant this incredible opposition to his moon and Saturn together in Pushya. So you could see that the ascendant and descendant line, that's a straight line. And then you have his moon in Pushya next to Saturn in conjunction on the descendant in the 7th house. So this means his mind is in this place of sort of emotion of Cancer. Pushya inside of Cancer it has like a nurturing and masterful element to it as well. And having the moon and Saturn together there, it means that his mind is going to be very aware of the limitations that are necessary to have healthy relationships, because this is the 7th house. And of course, at the end of his life, he did. And having Saturn in the 7th house also has this idea of maybe his relationships wouldn't really work out until he's older, and that he might lose some close relationships throughout his life as well. And yeah, so, but having moon and Saturn together in Pushya, I mean, it means his mind is very focused on like the laws and the rules of what it takes to do what he wants to do in life, because Pushya is a sign of mastery. It's also a sign of nurturing energy. So, and it's in the sign of Cancer, which is very emotional and internal. And so, and the moon, of course, is the ruler of Cancer. So, yeah, having this placement, and Saturn is the ruler of Pushya, actually. So the wisdom of Pushya is going to be really taken hold of, because Saturn is at a higher degree than Moon as well in Pushya. So there's this feeling of just again, mastery, except this would have more to do with deep knowledge of the fundamental laws of whatever he's involved with. And we could also see in this house, in this sign of Cancer, in the seventh house, that Pluto and part of fortune are in higher degrees in Ashlesha. And this means he's going to have powerful, very intense relationships with Pluto and Ashlesha. It could be also showing that he's very seductive himself, because Ashlesha is the most seductive, erotic nakshatra. And so it means that he's drawn to things that are very seductive and erotic, because it's in his seventh house. But David Bowie also sort of embodied the things that he was drawn to. Like, he would be drawn to the glam movement, and then he would become the poster child of the glam movement a year later. And he did this over and over throughout his career, where he would be inspired by something that would be very seductive, and then he would take that on as a costume and elevate it. And we see that with the part of fortune in Ashlesha. It means the things that seduced him are the things that brought him the greatest fortune in life, like the things he fell in love with. And first and foremost, he really fell in love with music. And even at the end of his life, he was listening he was still listening to modern music. Like, he was a big fan of Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album and Death Grips. And at the end of his life, both of those were on heavy rotation for him. And so, yeah, and that Pluto has an element of transformation and power as well. So having good fortune with transformation and power through seduction, through being seduced and seducing, is very much, anyone who knows David Bowie and has seen pictures and videos of him knows that he has a very seductive type of presentation. And let's see. And then we would go to the sun sign next. So that's his mind. So far we have the ascendant of what he's known for. He's known for being a genius, basically. Also in music, which is Shravana. And he's having the final degree of Abhijat. It's like the greatest degree. It's the highest degree of victory of the entire chart out of all 360 degrees. So it's just a way of saying that it's incredibly auspicious. It makes sense that his ascendant would be there. And David Bowie is known for being this, like, my brother was telling me the other day, where he was asking me, like, what other musicians have had, like, great albums across, like, to that degree across like 4 decades or whatever. And there's really are so few. I mean, Miles Davis had a million great albums, but I think might have lasted 3 decades. I don't know. It could be wrong. He might have lasted, but he didn't release his greatest work at the end of his life. What's really unique about David Bowie, and we'll cover this when we get into his albums, is that his last album, Black Star, is one of his best albums. And that's true for almost no artists. It's incredible that he achieved that. It's more like something you'd see from a film director, like a Stanley Kubrick, where, I consider Eyes Wide Shut one of his greatest movies, and that was his last movie. But he had great movies 40 years earlier as well. So, in fact, 2001: A Space Odyssey, we'll get to that in another video, but that was the inspiration for David Bowie's first big hit, basically, Space Odyssey. So Sun and Mars together in Purva Ashada, it shows that he's very ambitious. It shows that when he's activated in his power, doing what he's here to do in life. And this is something you'll almost always see if you're looking at a celebrity chart, because, almost by definition, if we know who they are to that degree, they have probably activated what they're here to do in their life, dharmically speaking. And but that's not necessarily true, because some people might just superficially do what they're here to do. That's not at a deeper dharma level or karma level, of deeper work and unfoldment, what they're here to do. But for David Bowie, it's in terms of incarnation and life purpose and stuff. But yeah, he has a sun and Mars together, which shows this really powerful ambition, this powerful masculine energy drive to achieve. I mean, Purva Ashada is all about ambition. Mars is all about ambition. And then the sun is his deeper soul's purpose and what he would be known for if he self-actualizing. And so David Bowie certainly has, because I mean, he's known for being just great, at what he does, at all his music. But trying to think about that sun. I mean, this is also in the 12th house. So the 12th house is about transformation and death. And so, I mean, he has just one of the most amazing and famous albums now from somebody who was making it on their deathbed. It's sort of going to be in the same pantheon as Mozart writing his Requiem on his deathbed, and Jay Dilla making donuts, when he's in the hospital close to death, So there's a few people who are known for making some of their greatest work, in their final days. And then the work even becomes about that to a large degree. And so that's one way of interpreting his chart that wouldn't have been possible prior to that last year or two of his life, or after he died, really. But so the way that his chart would have been interpreted before then is more about, he's known to transform himself. He's known to have many births and deaths throughout his life. And in fact, we'll take a look at his album Low and the song Heroes, which came out at a very key transformative part of his life when he was close to death. And then he just sort of transformed, and had a rebirth like a phoenix, in a new form. But even before then, he would play different characters, and he was really into having a character presentation with his albums. And so there would be a major transformation album to album that would have a lot of ambition behind it. And so that Mars, Sun, and Mercury, all in Purva Ashada and Sagittarius, is very much accurate. It really speaks to the way he would always reinvent himself. And then you have his Venus in Anuradha on the midheaven, and this is again showing his tremendous beauty, the beauty of his creativity, of his work, of his presentation. That he was known to be very just a beautiful looking person and sexual, like a sex symbol. And in retrospect, he was sort of, in modern language, he was almost one of the early examples of a famous gender fluid or non-binary type of person or presentation. He was one of the first really famous bisexual musicians, and to my knowledge. And so having his Venus in Scorpio in the 11th house, that there's a sexuality and there's a mystery about Scorpio. The 11th house is about the gains of one's career, the gains of one's status in the world, or not status, but activity and what you're known for in the world. And then this Venus being on top of his midheaven means he's especially known for, above all else, his beauty and the beauty of his music and his incredibly advanced musical taste and artistic taste and fashion taste. So yeah, I think I saw some video that said something about how the whole fashion of the 80s, of the design of the 80s, all started with something David Bowie did that is I'm blanking on right now, but he just had so much influence in so many ways, gains for himself and others. And Venus, because the 11th house is also about others, it wasn't just about him. He would actually make music that would just influence an entire decade. Like Ziggy Stardust was so influential to the 70s, and then in the I guess the 80s, Scary Monsters and the Let's Dance album, also incredibly influential to those decades. to that decade. And Anuradha is the sign of ecstasy or orgasm or just great bliss and excitement. And so there's something ecstatic about David Bowie's greatest work. Oh, yeah, I didn't look up the time for Life on Mars, but we will look at Hunky Dory, which that album is on. But Life on Mars, like that song comes to mind, or Starman, these songs that just go to these extremely ecstatic, peaks that were just incredible. And then he has his Jupiter at the end of the 10th house in Vishaka. Vishaka is about combining elements leading up to that energetic release of Venus on the midheaven. Jupiter also near the midheaven in Vishaka at the end of Libra. It's about an expansive sense of beauty and creativity applied to the combining of opposites, the combining of the yin and yang, or the masculine and feminine, the hard and soft, the loud and quiet. And he did this. He really combined, like just many elements. It's a sign of synthesis of ideas that's very erotic as well, actually. So let's see. I'm not going to cover everything in this chart. In fact, that might be enough. Oh yeah, I'll just look at the ruler of the chart real quick. So this is a day chart, but the sun cannot be the ruler or can't be the predominator. This is a process known as the ruler of the nativity, we'll call it. So there's a great astrology podcast episode on that you can find on YouTube, where I learned this technique from that I find very effective. So that's called a cadent house that the sun is in, the 12th house. So that means it can't be the ruler, which even though it's a day chart, it means the sun, or predominator. It means that the moon would be next in line to be the predominator because it's on a cadent house, which is 1, 4, 7, 10, one of those. And so the moon is in fact in a cadent house. So it is the ruler of this day chart, funny enough, or it's the predominator and the ruler. It's the predominator because the sun is not, we're not able to consider the sun because it's in a cadent house. And so the moon is not in a cadent house. So it does qualify to be the predominator of the chart, which acts as like the captain of the ship of the chart, the thing that's running it. But then the ruler of the moon is actually the moon itself, because the ruler of the sign the moon is in, Cancer, is the moon. And so there's something really interesting about that the ruler and predominator being the same. I mean, the metaphor from Hellenistic astrology is a captain of a ship, and then the person who is like the king or queen or wealthy person who sent out the ship on a mission. So in this case, this is a more independent spirit to this chart. There's something about the chart that's very self-involved, self-fulfilling, self-actualizing, self-energizing, because the predominator, the captain of the ship, is also the person who's bankrolling it and giving the direction to the captain of where to go, because the moon is in its own sign of Cancer in this case. And the moon acts as that ruler of the chart. And this means that his mind and understanding the limitations, this is very key. Saturn is often thought of as traditionally what's called a malefic, along with Mars, which another way of putting that comes from Sanskrit translated to English is this idea of it being harsh, that these are the harsh planets, Mars and Saturn, and then Venus and Jupiter are the gentle planets, but they're all necessary. That Mars energy that's in direct conjunction with his sun in Sag in the end of Purva Ashada, it's very necessary for him to have that ambition behind what's going on in his soul. Otherwise, this wouldn't come to fruition necessarily. So that Mars has a harshness to it. Like David Bowie might have been a really I mean, there's stories of him being very harsh. There's stories of him, like telling one of the members of Coldplay when they asked him if he would be on one of their songs, he listened to it and he said, "Well, it's not a very good song, is it?" It's a very harsh thing to say to somebody. And then Dave Grohl, who looked up to David Bowie, and of course David Bowie knows everyone looks up to him, but he had just like his cutting sense of humor that was harsh, no matter what. It seemed at times, but perhaps especially with people who might have looked up to him that were celebrities, because he probably didn't like being put on a pedestal, if I could guess. Yeah. So, but having yeah, and there's more I could read into to explain why he wouldn't like being why he wouldn't like being put on a pedestal. I mean, just real briefly, I just want to look at Leo. Yeah, like I thought, no placements in Leo. So in a nutshell, no placements in Leo. No, does he have any placements in the sun ruled nakshatras? Zero. So there's no like sun ruled nakshatras and nothing in the sun ruled sign. And those would be the things I would look to where someone would feel like, oh yeah, I'm the shit, But what's interesting is his ascendant is right after that Uttara Ashada. It's in Shravana where there's a humility, and it's in that final phase where the deepest level of power comes through surrender, basically, in Shravana, where as in Uttara Ashada, in those final 3 degrees, you would be in this hidden nakshatra of Abhijit. I think it's Abhijit. And then you would you'd feel very confident, let's say. Like Teal Swan has her ascendant, I believe, in the final degree or 2 of Uttara Ashada, as opposed to the first degree of Shravana. So this is a very interesting case study in that 1 degree difference in this hidden nakshatra that I'm not even able to show you visually right now in this chart. But yeah, so what I wanted to say here is, another just fun example is Dave Grohl like called him up he said the last time he emailed David Bowie, he said something about, well, I'll see you later. And then David Bowie said, probably not. And that was his way of saying he was probably going to pass away soon. But it was like this cutting humor or total bluntness where you couldn't necessarily tell if there was humor behind it or not. But when you see him in interviews, he had a very dry and sharp sense of humor that could be cutting. Yeah. So yeah, was that everything I wanted to cover here on his chart before we move on? I'm curious about the ruler of his ascendant. And we can look at this 2 ways just for fun. So Saturn is the ruler of the sign of his ascendant, the zodiac sign, and Saturn is in the 7th house with Moon, the ruler of his chart and the predominator of his chart. And yeah, so this shows the way, this really emphasizes the way that the Moon and Saturn were married together, Saturn in its own nakshatra. And then check this out. The ascendant is in Shravana, which is also ruled by the Moon. So the ascendant is in the nakshatra ruled by the Moon, and Saturn is in the nakshatra ruled by Saturn in conjunction with the Moon, which the 2 of them are the most important planets in his entire chart, based on Saturn being the ruler of the ascendant and the Moon being the predominator and ruler of the entire chart. I mean, so this is why this is my favorite technique now, called the Master of the Nativity. It's because it really just gives you such a beautiful focus into a chart on where the most important part of it is. And so David Bowie, I mean, in terms of like Myers-Briggs personality types, he seems very ENFP, or in Enneagram types, personality types, he's very much an Enneagram type 4, probably. And so, and that's very Cancer. I mean, he's an archetypal Cancer, as I see it, because this is, of course, a sidereal zodiac interpretation of his chart. If you were to look at his chart tropically, this would all move into Leo, and that would be very different. And in that case, you would have the Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter probably in the Maga, which would be very kingly, and then Leo, very kingly, And so, yeah, I mean, we're not going to do a double interpretation because that kind of makes my head dizzy. But if you ever just like see another video analyzing David Bowie's chart, it's most likely going to put that Moon and Saturn in Leo. not in Cancer like this sidereal interpretation does, just as a point of reference here. So with all that being said, let's jump into his albums. Yeah, so let's see, his music, rather. Actually, I think I'll end the video here and I'll just do a second video for the music. Keep it a little cleaner that way. So thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment if there's anything you'd like to say, and I'll catch you in the next video.